All right, diving deep into toxic parenting today, and wow, the sources for this one, pretty intense.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going through a bunch of YouTube videos, all from psychology channels,
Okay.
and one big takeaway, it's like the actual words parents use can have like a huge lasting impact, not just,
Oh.
yelling or the obvious abuse.
Right.
It's the subtle stuff that can be just as toxic. You ready to unpack this?
Absolutely. And what I found fascinating is how a lot of these sources highlight that these verbal patterns, they kind of echo throughout a person's life.
Oh, yeah.
It's not just childhood, it can affect their relationships, their self-esteem, even decision-making as adults.
It's true. And one of the videos, 8 toxic things parents say to their children, hit me with this stat.
Yeah.
In 2008, over 50,000 U.S. kids were victims of emotional abuse.
Wow.
Makes you think how much of what we just consider normal parenting might actually be.
Yeah, it's a sobering thought. And that statistic really highlights a crucial point. Toxic parenting, it's not about just like isolated incidents, right?
Yeah.
It's an ongoing pattern of behavior that really chips away at a child's well-being.
Yeah.
And we see that across all these sources, emotional harm, manipulation, trying to control them, boundary violations, neglect,
Okay.
even things that are done, quote unquote, with good intentions can actually be toxic in the long run.
Yeah. So let's get specific. The videos call out certain phrases that are like straight up verbal weapons.
Okay.
And one that really got me was, "You look terrible."
Ooh.
It's body shaming from the person who should be like your biggest supporter.
Right.
Does that tie into this whole like projection thing I've heard about?
Absolutely, yeah. Projection is basically a psychological defense mechanism where you take your own feelings like insecurities and put them onto someone else.
Oh,
So a parent who might be struggling with their own body image, they could unconsciously project those insecurities onto their child.
that makes sense. Another phrase that really stood out was, "You're the reason I'm unhappy."
Yeah.
Talk about burdening a kid with adult problems.
Oh, absolutely. And it can really make the child feel responsible for the parent's emotional state,
Right.
which is, it's not their job, right?
And then there's also the threat of abandonment, like, "I'm going to send you to boarding school
Yeah.
as punishment."
Yeah, exactly. And the psychological consequences of these phrases they're huge.
Yeah.
They can contribute to low self-esteem, anxiety, depression, having trouble trusting other people, even eating disorders.
It's like that one video said 10 toxic things parents say to their kids. Kids have no reference point for how they should be treated, so this toxic stuff just becomes their normal.
Right, exactly.
That's kind of scary.
It is.
But is it always intentional? Like, do parents even realize they're doing harm with these phrases?
That's a tough question,
Yeah.
It's complex. While some toxic behaviors are definitely intentional and they're used to manipulate, many parents might actually be replicating patterns from their own childhood
Oh, interesting.
without even realizing it. They might lack the awareness, they might not have the skills or even the resources to parent in a different way.
So it's not about, like, excusing it. It's just understanding where it comes from.
Exactly. Understand the neurons, right?
Yeah, it's like those generational cycles you hear about.
Exactly.
But okay, let's move into some of the less obvious signs of toxic parenting.
Okay.
Because someone might hear those phrases and be like, "Well, my parents never said that, I'm good."
Right.
But these videos highlight some really sneaky stuff, too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There are lots of subtle but equally damaging behaviors. For example, several sources talked about constant negativity and expecting the worst.
Oh, like, "You're gonna fail."
Exactly. Or you're not capable.
Right.
And if you grow up always hearing that, it erodes your self-belief.
Like setting them up to fulfill that prophecy. And then there's parentification
Yeah.
that came up a lot, where the kid takes on all these adult responsibilities way too young.
Right. The child becomes the caretaker, managing the house, taking care of siblings, sometimes even providing emotional support for the parent.
Wow.
And they end up feeling overwhelmed, resentful, like they were robbed of their childhood.
Right. And that can actually set them up for codependent relationships later on, too.
Exactly, yeah.
And speaking of codependency, there was another point about the parents being emotionally dependent on the child.
Oh, yeah.
It's like the roles are reversed.
Yeah, it creates this really unhealthy dynamic where the child feels completely responsible for how the parent is feeling.
Right.
And this leads to guilt, anxiety, difficulty asserting their own needs.
Wow, this is getting heavy.
Yeah.
Before we go any further, I think it's important to say that healing is possible.
Oh, absolutely.
These videos offer a lot of hope for breaking these cycles, but Wow. Where do you even start to unpack all of this?
Well, it's a journey, right? It's not a quick fix.
Yeah.
The sources all point to therapy, especially trauma-informed approaches as like a really powerful tool.
Okay.
There's also a lot of emphasis on self-compassion
Okay.
and what's called inner child work, which is really about addressing those emotional needs that went unmet in childhood.
Okay, so what is inner child work? I feel like I've heard that phrase,
Yeah.
but I don't fully get it.
So imagine connecting with the younger version of yourself,
Okay.
that part of you that experienced all the hurt and carries those wounds.
Hmm.
And it's about offering that inner child the understanding, the validation, the love that they might not have gotten.
So it's not about dwelling in the past, but understanding how it shaped you and then making choices to move forward.
Exactly.
I like that.
And one of the videos shared this really powerful quote from Susan Forward. It's okay to get angry about what happened, to grieve over the lack of parental love,
Yeah.
and allowing yourself to feel those emotions. That's a huge part of healing.
It makes sense. It's interesting, like, as we're talking about these phrases and patterns, I'm realizing how much of this I've even seen outside of parent-child relationships, too.
Right.
It makes you wonder how pervasive this stuff really is.
It really does. It speaks to how these patterns can become so ingrained, in families, communities, even entire cultures.
Oh, for sure.
One video, 10 characteristics of highly toxic parents, talked about this taboo that some cultures have
Yeah.
about speaking negatively about your parents,
Oh, yeah.
even if they hurt you.
It's like you're supposed to be grateful no matter what,
Exactly.
even if you are in a damaging environment.
Yeah. And it makes it really hard to heal if you can't even talk about the problem.
Exactly. And that makes me think about something else that came up. That idea of toxic parents seeing their kids as extensions of themselves.
Yeah.
Not like individuals.
That is a key characteristic that they highlighted in that video. 10 characteristics of highly toxic parents.
Okay.
They want their kids to live out their dreams, the ones they never got to. Or follow in their footsteps without even considering what the child wants.
It's like trying to make a mini-me instead of nurturing a unique person.
Exactly.
One of the videos even gave the example of forcing a kid into a specific career path, like being a doctor or a lawyer, even if they're not interested at all.
Right. It's all about control.
Yeah.
It's about the parent projecting their unfulfilled ambitions onto the kid.
And it can leave them feeling like they have no sense of self.
Exactly. Their identity is totally defined by the parent's expectations.
It's like they're living someone else's life,
Right.
not their own.
Yeah.
And that brings us to boundaries.
Yes.
One video, 7 toxic things parents do to their children, highlighted how this impacts a child's ability to even set boundaries. Because these parents, they just disregard any boundaries, invading their privacy,
Right.
making them feel powerless over their own lives.
Exactly. And that lack of boundaries, it can continue into adulthood.
Right.
It becomes hard to have healthy relationships, to stand up for their needs, protect themselves.
Right.
They might constantly need validation from others, struggle to know their own worth, make decisions on their own.
Almost like they never learned how to say no.
Right.
Or how to put their own well-being first.
Exactly.
And it's not just physical boundaries either.
No.
Subtle signs of toxic parents talked about parents being emotionally dependent on their kids,
Yes.
using them for their own needs.
It's like a role reversal.
Yeah.
The child becomes the one taking care of the parent's emotions,
Yeah.
constantly needing to reassure them, validate them, even trying to control the kid's behavior to manage their own anxieties.
So the kid ends up feeling responsible for the parent's happiness.
Yeah.
And they might just bury their own needs and feelings just to avoid upsetting their parents.
Exactly. And one video had even mentioned that these kids, they often grow up to be people pleasers. They're always looking for approval.
Right.
They struggle to set boundaries, put everyone else's needs above their own.
It's like they're always trying to fix or rescue other people.
Yeah, often at their own expense.
It's a heartbreaking cycle. You know, as we're talking about these patterns, it just hits me that a lot of these behaviors, they might not even be conscious on the parent's part.
Yeah.
They might think they're doing what's best.
You're right. And while some toxic parents are intentionally manipulative, there are many others who are just repeating what they learned.
Right.
They may not even realize the harm they're causing, or they simply lack the skills to parent differently.
This reminds me of the video 8 Hurtful Things Parents Tell Children,
Yeah.
which included that phrase, "That's how I was raised and I turned out fine."
That's right.
It's like a way to avoid facing the truth about their own upbringing.
It is. It's a classic example of generational trauma.
Yeah.
And it highlights just how important self-awareness is
Yeah.
and a willingness to challenge those patterns that we've inherited.
Right, because we can't just assume that because something was done to us, It's okay to do it to our own kids. And this is where education comes in. People need to be aware of these toxic patterns, both as parents and as individuals who might have experienced this themselves.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power.
Yeah.
Just being aware of these patterns can be a huge step in the right direction.
One thing that stood out from a lot of these videos was the lack of communication.
Oh, interesting.
They talked about how toxic parents shut down communication.
Yeah.
Using things like the silent treatment, just being dismissive.
Right.
Or refusing to even acknowledge the child's perspective.
Yeah, that communication breakdown is a huge red flag in any relationship, especially with a parent.
Yeah.
One video, 7 toxic things parents do to their children, specifically talked about the silent treatment and how damaging it can be. It's straight up emotional manipulation.
Yeah.
Leaves the child feeling anxious, confused, desperate to please the parent.
It teaches them that their feelings don't matter.
Exactly, like they're not worth listening to.
Right.
And that can have consequences that last into adulthood, affecting their ability to communicate in other relationships. They might have trouble expressing their needs, setting boundaries, resolving conflict.
We're just always walking on eggshells, afraid to say or do anything that might set the parent off.
Right, creating this sense of isolation, loneliness.
And this leads to another point that was brought up in the videos.
Right.
The impact of those unmet needs, specifically the need for love, validation, security.
Right, when those needs aren't met, it creates this deep feeling of longing, insecurity that can carry into adulthood.
And those unmet needs can manifest in different ways. Looking for validation from other people, self-destructive behaviors, unhealthy relationships.
It's like they're always trying to fill this void, this emptiness from the lack of love.
And one video even mentioned how these unmet needs can lead to people recreating those same toxic patterns in their own relationships.
Oh, wow.
As either the victim or even the perpetrator.
Yeah, it's like they're subconsciously trying to work through those old wounds.
Right.
But they end up just repeating the cycle.
It just shows how important it is to recognize those patterns and get help to break free.
Absolutely. And it's not about blaming the parents or dwelling on the past. It's about understanding how it affected you. And making a conscious choice to create a healthier, more fulfilling life.
I love that.
Yeah.
Making a conscious choice.
It's empowering.
It is.
Right? You're saying, okay, this happened, but I'm not going to let it control me. I'm choosing a different path.
Exactly.
And realizing that healing takes time. It's a journey, not a destination.
It's a process.
It is. It requires effort and often support.
Yeah, but it's so worth it.
It is.
And one thing that resonated with me from these videos was this emphasis on self-compassion.
Oh, yeah.
It's so easy to blame yourself when you've been through this.
Right.
But they encourage the viewers to be kind to themselves.
Absolutely.
Acknowledge the pain and honor their healing journey.
Self-compassion is so important. It's the antidote to self-criticism.
It is.
And it's the foundation for a healthy relationship with yourself.
Yeah, and one video even mentioned that inner child work, which involves reconnecting with that wounded part of yourself.
Yes.
And offering it the love and validation that it might not have gotten.
Exactly.
And there was this really beautiful quote in one of the videos.
Oh, yeah.
It's okay to get angry about what happened, to grieve over the lack of parental love. It's like giving yourself permission to feel those emotions.
Yes.
Acknowledge the injustice.
And to start letting go.
Yeah.
You know, as we get towards the end of this deep dive, it's amazing to me how much we haven't even covered.
Yeah.
There's just so much to this topic of toxic parenting.
It's huge.
It is. And I think it's important to remember that this is just the beginning, right?
Yeah, it's a starting point.
It's an invitation to keep exploring these ideas, do your own research.
Right.
And seek support if any of this resonated with you.
Yeah, what really stood out to me was how these videos really highlight the sneaky nature of emotional abuse. It's not always yelling and physical violence. It can be so subtle, manipulative, even disguised as love.
Exactly, and that's why it's so important to educate ourselves about these patterns. Be aware of the warning signs.
Yeah.
Create a culture where emotional well-being is valued and protected.
Absolutely. And, you know, one final thought for everyone listening. Think about the messages you got growing up, not just from your parents, but from like society, the media, your friends.
Right.
How much of what you believe about yourself, about relationships, even about success is rooted in those messages?
Wow.
And are those messages actually helping you?
Yeah.
Or are they holding you back? Something to think about as we wrap up this deep dive.
Yeah, that's a really powerful question to think about.
It is. It really makes you examine all those beliefs that we just kind of accept as true, you know? Yeah, it's about taking ownership of our own story, deciding what we want to believe ourselves in the world. And sometimes that means like really challenging those deep-seated messages that might be holding us back.
And one thing that all these videos emphasized is that breaking free from these patterns, it's a journey. It's not like a one-and-done thing.
Right.
You know,
it's a process.
It takes time, effort, and a lot of times support.
It does. It does. But it's so worth it.
It is.
It's easy to get caught up in the negativity, but man, there's just so much resilience in people.
Oh, yeah.
These videos, they offer a lot of hope.
They do.
And encouragement for anyone who's dealing with the effects of toxic parenting.
Absolutely. We have such an incredible capacity for healing and growth.
We do.
These videos remind us that we're not alone in this.
Yeah.
And there are resources out there to help you break free and create a life that's truly your own.
I love that phrase, create a life that's truly your own. It's about taking back your power, your voice, your sense of self, recognizing that we all deserve to be loved, respected, treated with kindness.
Absolutely. And for anyone listening who's on that journey, just remember to be patient with yourself.
Yeah.
Celebrate every step you take.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to reach out for help when you need it.
You don't have to go through it alone.
You don't.
And one thing that really stayed with me was that emphasis on setting boundaries in your current relationships and the ones you make in the future.
Yeah.
Learning to say no, protecting your energy, prioritizing your well-being.
So important. Boundaries are crucial for any healthy relationship.
Yeah.
And it's something that a lot of people who've experienced this kind of toxic parenting, they may have to really learn how to do that.
Right.
It's about understanding that it's okay to have your own needs.
Yes.
It's okay to say no, and it's okay to put yourself first sometimes.
Another powerful theme was forgiveness.
Yes.
Not necessarily forgiving the toxic parent, but forgiving yourself. Forgiving yourself for believing those negative messages.
Right.
For the mistakes you might have made.
Yeah.
For the time it took to even recognize the toxicity and start healing.
That's such a crucial part of the process.
Yeah.
Forgiveness is so powerful as an act of self-love.
It is.
And it's a vital step in healing. It doesn't mean you're condoning what happened or excusing the harm.
Right.
But it allows you to let go of that anger.
And resentment.
Yeah, and move forward.
You know, as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm just left with this sense of hope.
Me too.
These videos, they really drive home the point that even though the past can have a huge impact, it doesn't have to define us.
It doesn't.
We have the power to choose a different path.
We do.
Heal those wounds and create a life full of love and joy.
And real connection.
That's it. That's what it's all about.
It is.
So to everyone listening, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into toxic parenting. Remember, you are worthy of love, you are capable of change, and you have the strength to create a life that is truly your own.